How about fatty liver disease? That was more of an elderly alcoholic issue. And now you're seeing children with this. Like, that should be sending off alarms in our head.
And the problem is there are many people, I think, right now that are looking at obesity as a disease. And we look at diabetes as a disease. But in reality, diabetes and obesity are both 100% preventable by lifestyle and dietary choices. And to try to say, well, it's okay, do whatever you'd like with your diet, we'll fix it on the other end with a drug, is, in my view, incredibly backwards thinking.
Because I have a lot of family members, who are on this stuff. Well, my buddy has this, everybody is on these medications. I mean, you think of statins, you think of metformin, this is just part of life. And it's like, no, just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. Morning, Jared. Thanks so much for being back here today.
It's good to be here, Nikki. Thanks for welcoming me back.
Absolutely. I'm excited for today's conversation, but more importantly, you are a new grandpa. How's grandpa life been?
Grandpa life is like the best life. It really is. The coolest thing that I experienced that nobody prepared me for, because nobody really ever talked about it. They told me how much I'm going to love my grandkids. And I thought, well, yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. I'm going to love my grandkids. And I didn't know how similar it would be to loving my own kids when they first popped into my arms. But what I didn't expect was what it was like to see my kids become parents and how awesome that is. The whole thing is just, I don't know. It's incredible. It's everything people say about being a grandpa or grandma is absolutely true. And then some. That is so cool.
And remind me, they live local with you, like close to you guys,
really
right?
Close. Yeah. My son, who got me my first grandbaby, he lives less than 10 minutes away. My daughter's about 20 minutes away. So
what a dream.
And I got 2 in a row, about 6 weeks apart. And then I just recently got married as well, and gained 2 grandbabies in that. So we got 4 between us, and it's just fantastic.
Geez, in a matter of like a few months, you go from 0 to 4, just like that. Oh, yep. That's so exciting. I know I can't compare it to or relate to the grandparent aspect, but being a mom. And I think on the flip side, Jared, seeing my parents become grandparents. That is the coolest thing. And my mom, I'm so blessed. We have a village. She comes every Sunday, Monday. And I think she's actually gotten younger in age, particularly my grandma. Well, both grandmas, or all the grandmas. Just them running around with her, their endurance. It is just the coolest thing to see ever in the world.
Yeah, we're all having a lot of fun with it. It's an incredible blessing.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get to the meat of the episode today. I'm really excited for this conversation. I know you've done a few episodes on this. We're chatting about what's the big deal with Ozempic. And there's a lot of ways we can pull this apart today. There's going to be some exploratory conversation, some education, but I think some just organic conversation of what's going on. We're not claiming to be experts, but we want to bring some of this information to the surface. You've recently sent me an episode that I thought was fascinating. It's kind of gotten me down a rabbit hole of reading and researching more. But Ozempic, we're going to explore kind of the science and the biology behind it, maybe touch in a little bit of like the political component of it. But I'd love to start out. What is Ozempic? What's happening with the body? Why are we taking it? What's going on?
Yeah, well, first off, for people, I think it's so commonplace now that most people have at least heard the word Ozempic if they don't understand what it is. There's also another brand name, Wegovy, that you may have heard of that's a little lesser known, but still a very popular drug. And they're essentially the same thing. They are what are considered peptides, and they are being used. They were originally approved by FDA for diabetes, type 2 diabetes specifically, but are now being used far more broadly for weight loss, and recommended on a regular basis to people who are not diabetic or are pre-diabetic, as well as those who are diabetic. So it's gone beyond what the original scope of the medicine was. And now even places like Weight Watchers, people like Oprah Winfrey, lots of people, pushing this as kind of the next big thing that can really help people that are dealing with weight issues and obesity.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of talk, a lot of celebrities that are using it, and with a lot of success. And now, as far as external success, we're not really hearing or seeing what's going on the inside, kind of this gut issue, stomach discomfort. But one thing that I find that's interesting is on the instructions, this is a drug to take for life. It is not a temporary thing. And you find that when individuals stop taking this, are you hearing or hearing conversations that these individuals are gaining the weight back?
Well, the biggest thing that I'm seeing that there's actually really strong evidence of so far is that people are indeed losing a lot of weight, but that as much as half of that weight is muscle mass, not fat mass. And it looks like it's maybe averaging close to 40% of the weight loss is muscle. And so whether or not people are regaining the weight right now is I think what we're going to see in the next year or two is that a lot of people who discontinue it absolutely will, because we all know it's been scientifically proven for decades that more lean muscle helps to ward off fat, keeps the metabolism running higher, and the less muscle we have, the more apt we are to gain fat. And when we look at the health of the body, it's not nearly as much about the number on the scale as it is about the body composition. What's your fat percentage versus your muscle mass? And as we're dropping fat percentage, we are becoming healthier. But when we're just dropping weight and our fat percentage in this case could actually be coming up, we're becoming less healthy, although we might be also less heavy.
Absolutely. And that's why BMI isn't necessarily a healthy indicator, because we're just taking into consideration the fat and the weight, but we really need to be looking at the muscle density, because as we age, not just as we age, but it is very important. Muscle is so crucial for our health, for glucose metabolism, for longevity speaking. So you said 40% is when you're losing that muscle mass?
40% of the weight loss appears to be muscle on average, based on the studies that I've seen. And that is, as far as I know, that's unprecedented compared to anything other than basically a starvation diet. Almost every other diet that's ever come along over the years, whether it be, keto or carnivore or vegan or paleo or whatever, people that are losing weight on those are losing a significantly lower percentage of their muscle mass due to that. Also, Niki, we should point out, because I should have said this in the beginning, the brand names of these drugs are Wegovy, Ozempic, and there's one also called Rybelsus, but the drug itself is semaglutide. So maybe your listeners have heard of semaglutide, not those brand names. So all of that stuff, same thing.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And, something that's interesting is in this episode, we were kind of going back and forth on a conversation. It's with Callie Means, who he's partnered with his sister, who actually created Levels, the CGM company. And he used to work in pharma, and he's come out of that, and he is on just a fight for life to dismantle, I think, the system and really get to the crux of the matter. And one thing that he mentioned that I thought was pretty fascinating is, if there's a dirty fish tank, you clean the fish tank. You don't drug the fish. And I think something that's important is, let's get to the root of this. And, I have to use integrated medicine. I have to use Western medicine for some things. But if that is our number one line of defense, is here's a pill, here's a drug, here's a pill to solve a problem, because there's doctors now that are giving this to all obese and overweight individuals above the age of 12. And that is their first line of defense. That's a problem in my eyes. That I think there's a time and a place for this stuff when it comes to acute issues, when it comes to, surgeries, appendix bursts, all these different things. We need Western medicine. We are so grateful for the advances. But if we are depending and making Western medicine the first line of defense, when there's diet, lifestyle factors that can come into play, or even supplementation that can happen first, I think we need to start addressing that. How do you feel about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they're starting to recommend for over the age of 12 cholesterol medicines as well, that are also generally considered lifetime medicines. And the thing is, what we really have to look at, Nikki, we don't have to go back that far in the history of this world and of this country in particular here in America to see that there didn't used to be the problem that we're seeing now. We didn't have 12-year-olds that were obese, very, very rarely. And now you see it on a pretty regular basis. In fact, children, as much as the obesity epidemic is plaguing adults in this country, the rates of obesity in children are skyrocketing higher than any other age group. And so that isn't because of genetics. It's because of lifestyle and diet and food processing and so many other aspects that are part of the modern age we live in that don't have anything to do with the person or the genetics of that person. And so if we say, okay, well, this issue is an issue that we should treat with a drug, that would indicate that it's a disease. And the problem is there are many people, I think, right now that are looking at obesity as a disease, and we look at diabetes as a disease. But in reality, diabetes and obesity are both 100% preventable by lifestyle and dietary choices. And to try to say, well, it's okay, do whatever you'd like with your diet, we'll fix it on the other end with a drug is, in my view, incredibly backwards thinking.
Absolutely. And I think that's for a further conversation that I'm not sure we're going to get into today of where's the spending going? What is the reason that we're pushing these pills? That's a whole other conversation. And I can link a few different videos and resources in the show notes if you want to kind of venture into that. And I think, to your point of kids getting obese at a younger age and diabetes, how about fatty liver disease? That was more of an elderly alcoholic issue. And now you're seeing children with this. Like that should be sending off alarms in our head to your point that this is not a disease. This is something that we can reverse through diet, through lifestyle. Yes, you might have epigenetics or certain factors that make it slightly more difficult, but generally it's the foods. I won't even call it food, the stuff we are putting into our bodies, the lack of movement. And, our country is just surpassing with obese rates compared to most all of the other countries. And I think we need to start thinking a little bit more critically, asking questions. I know this is kind of tangenting off the original conversation of the Ozempic, but I think it is a bigger conversation of what are we doing? What are we telling people to do? And just because it's common for, let's say, 60-year-olds, I think the average amount of pharmaceuticals that a 6-year-old is on is about 7. Mm-hmm. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. And I think that's something that we need to start thinking a little bit more critically on, because I have a lot of family members, who are on this stuff. Well, my buddy has this, everybody is on these medications. I mean, you think of statins, you think of metformin, this is just part of life. And it's like, no, just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal.
Yeah. And you'll think about it. You brought up a great point that sort of popped something into my head with the over 60 being on 7 drugs. Think about the people that are over 60 now. I'm 51. And so I'm, 10 years away from that age group. And I think back to my childhood and my teen years and the likelihood, even in my family, which is my family's an anomaly, very, my parents were very health conscious and everything else. But my friends and neighbors, other kids that I knew, none of us that age were on drugs. We weren't on anything really. There were at that time in life when I was in like junior high and high school, at that time in this world, I guess you could say, they were just starting to put kids on things like Ritalin for ADD, ADHD. And that was about the only thing that you would see that was a prescription drug that was an ongoing use. Like, yeah, they were prescribing antibiotics and they were prescribing things like that. But ongoing use drugs, you never would have heard of a kid on a high blood pressure medicine. You never would have heard of a kid on a statin. You never would have heard of a kid on a weight loss drug or diabetes medication. Unless you had a type 1 diabetes child, there really weren't kids hardly that dealt with diabetes at all. And so when we look at what is happening with people in my age range and older on 7 drugs, imagine if we start giving those drugs to kids when they're in their teens, how many drugs are they going to be on when they're in their 60s?
Well, we already are doing that. I think the numbers are about 60% of teens are on an SSRI. Now, granted, what's going on in the world is pretty scary. And, I'm actually, and I'm no shame to admit it, again, there's a time and a place. I got on an SSRI a few years ago, and I've been proactively working to filter off because I think there's a time and a place when you've tried every single thing you possibly can, but you still need that deeper support. I think it's okay. I think that's, important. We need to get to a stable level in order for us to kind of pull back the layers. And so now I've been able to be off of it, but 60% of teens are on an SSRI. We need to start questioning this, I think, especially as parents. But coming back to specifically Ozempic, what's going on in the body? Why is this, is it an effect on the insulin? Is it the glucose? Why is this more of a problematic issue? Especially because we say this is something you need to take for the rest of your life. It's not a temporary thing. What's happening with Ozempic?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really tough thing to wrap my head around, actually, because it's interesting. I tell this, I think, when I talk about Ozempic on Vitality Radio. I have a friend who's a very dear friend of mine, and he's an avid listener of my show. And he oftentimes sends me articles and things that he thinks, maybe I should consider discussing. And about a year back-ish, somewhere in there, he started sending me articles about Ozempic and saying, I think there's something bigger here than just weight loss. This seems almost coordinated or something like that, because now we have all of these celebrities pushing it. We have big weight loss companies like Weight Watchers presenting it or pushing it, and just about every doctor in the country is starting to recommend Ozempic for people with weight. Now, it's obvious to me, Niki, that if you have a drug that works really, really well for weight loss, which frankly, Ozempic does. It works really, really well if weight loss is the only measuring stick you're using for it. You have something like that, a doctor or heck, a guy in a health food store like me, one of the most common things they're ever going to hear is, I need help losing weight, right? So doctors must hear that from half their patients, or they're looking at their patient and saying, you should lose weight, right? So whichever way it's going, there's a lot of pressure in that office for him to try to figure out how to help his patient. So it makes sense to me why doctors are recommending this stuff, because it works. It's an answer. The question is it the right answer for the health of the patient, especially in the long term? And when you start to look at, if you just take the one statistic that I gave early on in the show of 40% of the weight loss being muscle mass, that in and of itself for me is enough to be a deal breaker if I were to consider this drug. But what about the potential for increase in thyroid cancer that appears very, very likely with Ozempic and semaglutide, and the stomach paralysis? I mean, do we want to talk about that for a minute? Because to me,
please, let's dive in.
Of all of the side effects that you could have from a drug, that sounds about as bad as it gets. So we have this fairly common, and no, it's not 20% or 50% of the people. It appears to be in the, single digit numbers of people that use Ozempic and Wegovy and any other form of semaglutide that are experiencing stomach paralysis. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you think about paralysis, it's pretty obvious that the stomach essentially is just not moving anymore. It's not capable of moving anymore. And so we then no longer are able to digest food, effectively, if at all. And that can lead, well, for one thing, it can lead to death. The thing that they want us to believe, it seems, is that this is extremely rare, and it's not as extremely rare if you look at the numbers, as you might think, and that if you go off of Ozempic, it goes away. But it doesn't in some cases. There are people who have died, and other people who are dying of stomach paralysis because they literally can't digest food anymore. Because at its heart, Ozempic slows digestion. And when you think about a lot of the different drugs that are out there, in fact, I would say most drugs that are out there are what I call overriders of the natural process. The body does what it normally does. Let's take a PPI, for instance. So a proton pump inhibitor you'd use for acid reflux. It's supposed to selectively go in and turn off a certain number of proton pumps inside the system, inside the gut. It's not supposed to turn them all off. But how does the drug know how many to turn off, and how is it going to affect each individual in that process? And how do we know if 20 milligrams, 40 milligrams, or 80 milligrams of a PPI is the effective dose for an individual? Well, the truth is the only way to know is to try the drug and see what it does. And at that point, it can actually be too late, especially in the case of something like Ozempic. So if a drug's supposed to be selective, which I think is a horrible name because a drug can't think. So it's not going to go in there and select what it does. It's just going to do what it's designed to do. And in some people, it's going to do a lot more of it. And in some people, it's going to do a lot less of it. And we know that that's the case with PPIs. And some people, it turns off the acid production completely. So the same thing could be said about something like semaglutide. If we are supposed to slow the digestive process, then in some people, it will stop the digestive process. And stopping the digestive process is the best way that I can think of to slowly kill a body.
And let's take into the big consideration when we talk, gut health, because we're talking about the stomach, the gut health, 70% of serotonin is made in the gut. And if you are creating this paralysis, and we assume that we can take a drug like this and we're not going to notice any sort of mental side effects. I believe it's 70% resides in the gut.
It's actually the estimated, the numbers I've seen are 80 to 90%. So almost all of the serotonin. Yeah.
Yes. And so if we're creating a paralysis going on in there, serotonin, for those of you listening, that's your happy mood, ease hormone where you feel really good. And if we are putting a stop or paralysis in the gut, you don't think that's going to affect your serotonin levels. And then that's just going to put more individuals or more teens on these SSRIs. So I think it's a much bigger conversation, but you know what? I think we've done a lot of doom and gloom, yes, there is this effective drug that can work for weight loss, but it has a lot of other implications. So you're saying now that this probably isn't a great idea. What can we do? What can we do? What's in our hands that is, a healthy alternative? There's supplements on the market. I mean, we could talk diet and lifestyle. What's out there that might not be as detrimental?
Yeah. And there's certainly a lot we can talk about. And I had you on my show just a month or so ago talking about this minus the Ozempic part of the conversation. So I think we've got some great stuff we can share. And you actually shared, what you consider kind of your three pillars of, blood sugar control and metabolism balancing that I think we should get into. But if it's okay with you, I want to dive one more second back into what you just said about the serotonin issue. So Novo Nordisk, the people that make Ozempic, and another one called Saxenda, there's about 7, I think, of these drugs total on the market right now, depending on the country. They're already noting suicidal thoughts as a potential side effect of the drug. Suicidal behavior and ideation have been reported in clinical trials with other weight management products as well. But with Ozempic, it seems specifically high. They are telling doctors to monitor their patients for depression, suicidal thoughts or behavior, and or any other unusual changes in mood and behavior. And they are finding in some people that even coming off of the drug, they're still experiencing suicidal ideation, which would indicate to me, and I'm not sure if this is accurate because I don't know if we have enough studies to back this, that would be part of the the drug kind of did more than its job, turned too much off, slowed too many things down, including the production of, certain neurotransmitters like serotonin. So anyway, we know that that's not just hypothesis, that that's actually happening as well.
Absolutely.
So then to answer your question, it's a good place to go from here. I think as we lose weight naturally, as we adjust our diets, as we move more, we know that cleaner eating absolutely also has been proven to enhance mood. Higher nutrient eating has been shown to enhance mood. Organic food, because of the higher level of nutrients, has been shown to enhance mood. And movement has been shown to enhance mood. So once again, we look at the drug option versus the natural option, and all of the potential side effects with the drug option become potential benefits with the natural option. And here's the problem, Niki. It's not as easy, right? That's the problem. It's
simple, but it's not easy.
But it's not as easy. It's easier to go on an injection and suddenly just not be hungry anymore, which is basically what Ozempic does. That's easier, but easy in life, pretty much across the board, normally doesn't come with that big of a reward. At least that's been my experience.
Not long-lasting reward. The resiliency, toughness, gritness. I mean, we don't need to all be David Goggins, but I think there is a lot to be said of gritting through things, of toughing out through things. I think the reward is so much more beneficial because of what we had to go through. And the thing is that's long-term. I think, maybe it's as you get a little bit older, you realize, okay, I don't necessarily want to do stuff for aesthetics or for the short term. Whereas I want to feel great. I want to increase my health span, not just my lifespan. I want to put good foods. It's funny that you say clean eating, because for some reason, that's such a trigger word for some people. They hate the word clean eating. I think it's totally fine. I am all for it. But even asking yourself, is this actually food? And I would say among my peers, I'm probably one of the healthiest eaters in my entire group. But as I make homemade food for my daughter and I'm feeding her this, even like little things that I eat to follow up, I'm like, is this actually food? It's starting to get me to question, let's take the COVID bread baking, scenario. I'm like, I need to start making my own stuff, because there's two parts. There's the diet and there's the lifestyle that you mentioned. The food, let's decrease the inflammatory foods, the highly processed foods. Did these foods exist 100 years ago? And movement, I think a blog post with LifeSeasons, we just posted it today. It's called NEAT, N-E-A-T, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So if you're listening, you're like, I hate exercise. The word gym triggers me, which I argue, are we getting triggered with too many things nowadays? But, exercise workouts is the last place I want to be. There's something called NEAT, and that's walking, standing, doing laundry, cleaning the house, gardening, intimacy with your partner. It doesn't have to be this boot camp. It's just moving your body throughout the day. And, I'll tell you, when I'm cleaning the house, I'm much more enthusiastic doing it, because I know it's not just benefiting the household. I'm making a difference in my internal body, my metabolic health. So diet, lifestyle, we need to be moving more. We need to be standing more, and we need to be looking a little bit more, in depth at the foods that we're eating, and ask ourselves, is this food? Any other things that you can think about?
Yeah, well, you shared a little bit of personal stuff there, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to share a little bit as well, because there's an interesting thing that I've noticed as I've looked at, what you can consider, health gurus, quote unquote health gurus, people that have, podcasts like we both do talking about this stuff, but also people with, much bigger names than we have that have, bigger audiences. And, you mentioned guys like David Goggins. There are those types of folks out there. And we look at them and we think, that's maybe, I think a lot of people look at that and say, that's not a place that I can be. Like, that's so far from where I'm at. How in the world am I supposed to get there? Well, it's an interesting thing. I grew up understanding this type of thing better than the vast majority of people around me, because I grew up with two super health conscious parents. I grew up in a health food store. I was eating, organic way before organic was cool, and all that kind of stuff. And so no excuses, really. I had no excuses to go off as a teenager and start eating all of the junk that I could possibly buy with my health food store income that I was making for my parents. But that's exactly what I did. I was eating, I laugh about this all the time because I think if I ate this now, I'd slip into a food coma and never recover. But I used to get a double deluxe cheeseburger. I remember that, with a large onion ring and a chocolate chip shake. That was my lunch more often than not, across the street from the health food store that I would then go back to and work at. So, I mean, what you call it hypocrisy, you can call it stupidity. I don't know what you want to call it. Probably a little bit of both, but that was how I grew up after I had my own money and started eating like that. And I paid a heavy price for that in my 20s with severe acid reflux and a bunch of other issues that I dealt with. I have a real tendency to go after the sweet things in life. Unfortunately, as much in food as in people. I love sweets, and I always have. And so it's always been a challenge for me to keep my weight balanced. I've never been, 300 pounds, but I've also rarely been what I would consider to be my ideal weight. I tell people that because I know better, I do enough to not get really overweight. But if I didn't have the background that I have, I may be one of those guys that is, morbidly obese. And in fact, I think I probably would be, based on the tendencies that I've developed over the years and the bad habits, you could say, that I've adopted. So interestingly, at 45 years old, so 6 years ago now, I was experiencing some new health challenges and some frustration, but I was also, I was just coming out of a divorce, and one of the darkest times in my life emotionally that I'd ever experienced. And with rough emotions, oftentimes for people who like to eat, you end up eating more and worse than you were, because comfort food is called that thing for a reason, right? So I was kind of on that path. I wasn't taking very good care of myself and really struggling. And I met this amazing woman who 6 years later I married. But this woman didn't know thing one about the difference between, clean food and dirty food, and, a seed oil versus olive oil, or, why artificial colors might matter, or any of these types of things. She came from a very, kind of modern medicine family, mom a nurse, sister a nurse. She was a CNA, just didn't have a feel for this stuff. And so when we met, we were, at least when it comes to our thoughts about health and nutrition, we couldn't have been too much further apart from each other. I started helping her with significant gut issues with supplementation. And then she recognized that I actually did know a few things that maybe she could learn from. And then she started, listening to me and listening to my podcast. And this is an interesting thing, because for a long time, especially during that phase, I felt pretty hypocritical. I was doing most of the things that I told people they ought to do, but I was also doing a lot of the things that I knew better, right? And shouldn't do. So, and I'm sorry this has taken such a long time.
No, please.
But I think there's value in it, hopefully. So my sweetheart, Jen, she started feeling so much better than she ever had, mentally, emotionally, physically, all the things. She felt so much better that she really started kind of taking the reins and saying, hey, we're just going to get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And so we started eating even more organically than I already was. We started skipping out on a lot of things that we used to do. And she felt so much better that my motivation became, I'm going to eat that way with her because it makes such a big dent in how she feels. And so I was doing it really more for her than I was for me, which actually tended to motivate me more than when I was doing it for myself. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So then she decided, I recommended it, but she decided to do it, a grain-free lifestyle, which, if you don't know what that means, like if you've never really examined grain-free, if you're listening to the show right now, it's a challenge. I mean, people go gluten-free all the time, and that's not particularly easy. Grain-free is a whole nother story. We're talking no corn, no rice, no wheat, no oats, all that stuff. And all of a sudden her chronic pain was almost gone with grain-free. And so I said, well, if she's eating grain free and we eat a lot of our meals together, I'll eat grain free. So then I went grain free. This is 2 years ago. And then I discovered that when I skipped out on seed oils, which are super inflammatory and also terrible for trying to lose weight.
And this is kind of, seed oils is like the new conversation now. I haven't dove into it enough yet, but that's like the new smoking almost.
Yeah, and I think it really is. I mean, the level of inflammation that are created by seed oils is off the hook, and 85% of disease in this country is inflammatory in nature, including diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and all these things. So then I went seed oil free, and my chronic hip pain that I had I have like a malformed hip from birth. My chronic hip pain started to go away. And so then Jen said, well, if he's eating seed oil free, I'll eat seed oil free. So now we're mostly grain free and mostly seed oil free. And both of us are way healthier, but it actually took somebody coming in from the outside to sort of convince me that I needed to really lock in and practice what I preach. And if I want to have optimal health, I'm starting to close in on my high school weight that I haven't been at for 35 years, because not of dieting. And I really want to specify this, but because of a total diet lifestyle change. I still eat. I don't count calories at all. I eat essentially what I want to eat, with the exception of these categories. And yes, they're big categories. But what really happens when you go seed oil free and you go grain free is you make your own food. That's what happens. We've almost never eat out. We eat in and we get to choose what goes into our food. It's very old school, but you know what? We love it. We eat great. We enjoy what we eat, and we are both feeling and looking better than we have. I can tell you right now, I look at pictures of us when we met 6 years ago. We're both 6 years older. We both look better than we did then. And we both feel a whole lot better than we did then.
Yeah, I think removing some of those staple foods in the diet you see right there, the pain is going away. You feel more youthful. You have this energy. Your skin starts clearing up. You mentioned something that I think is so important, and this is what we do in the coaching world, is a lot of people know they need to lose weight. Why can't they do it? And it sounds like there was a shift when Jen came into your life and she started noticing these changes, that it was something bigger than yourself. It was something outside of yourself that motivated you to make this change. And that's what I work with my clients of, okay, you need to lose 30 pounds. Why aren't you doing it? That's not going to get anywhere. That's what doctors tell us, and they end up in the same place. But when you ask them, evoking questions of what would be possible, and they might say, well, I could go skiing with my kids, or my wife feels so much better. I think when we can get to the heart of the matter and look outside ourselves, nothing is more motivating than that. And I think, we live in this self-care, self-focused world. When we can start looking more externally, more other-centric, I think we can start seeing the pendulum switch, and we start feeling better. That's why they say, I think giving a gift is almost more rewarding and fulfilling to you than receiving a gift, because you see somebody else light up. You see somebody else's life be impacted. And so that's so cool to hear that real world example of how you wanted to make these changes first and foremost for her. And then you started noticing the benefits, and it kind of went back and forth, that you motivate one another. And I think that's such a beautiful partnership. And that's what we're here to do, is to push each other to be better, so that we can, love more and do better things in this world. So, I think that's really cool to hear. So we've spent a good amount of time talking about diet. Before we wrap up, lifestyle, movement, what are some other options? Let's explore some supplementation. I know berberine, our glucose stability. How have you had success in your stores with supplementation for the individuals on a weight journey?
Yeah, so that it's always been one of the most challenging questions to answer for years. You know, how do I lose weight? What do I take? Because when people come into a health food store and they say, I want to lose weight, they're really looking for a pill that's going to help them lose weight, right? And of course, the big picture goes way beyond any supplement that we could potentially sell them. And so I'm very honest with my customers. They come in, they say, I want to lose weight. I say, okay, so let's talk about what else you're doing beyond a supplement, because there's not a supplement in my store that will fix the problem. There are supplements that will absolutely assist and can help you get there. But what are you doing? And we have that conversation. And some people are all in. They're like, oh yeah, well, I've got my gym membership, or I've recently started eating like this, or I've cut out that, or whatever it is. And other people are like, I really just, can you just give me something that'll do the job for me?
And I want to pause you real quick, Jared. Sorry. I want to interrupt in the sense that I can emphasize or empathize with those people who want Ozempic because it is a quick fix. When you are in a spot where you don't feel like yourself in your body, when you feel so burdened by the amount of weight, you do feel paralyzed. I mean, paralyzed in the stomach, but you feel almost paralyzed. Like, I will do anything to lose this weight, to start feeling okay again. So I can empathize with these individuals that if that can happen really quickly, I see how it's an easy grab of like, okay, give me this. I can start feeling the effects really quickly. The problem is it's not something you can easily shift off of. And so that's where I think we do need to push to the heart of the matter of, let's get to the root problem of what's going on and how can we meet them where they're at and take baby steps towards a healthier direction. So what if you do have that client that says, I just want a quick pill? How do you conversate with them around that?
So the first thing I'll tell people, and this is a little bit of a, for lack of a better term, it's a little tricky, but I'm very honest about it. So it's not a trick, but it works. We have a product. I actually developed it 15 years ago. It's called 10-Day Downsize. And the funny thing is, I was developing this brand called 10-Day Results with a partner, actually a couple of partners. And I didn't want a weight loss product, but they really wanted a weight loss product because weight loss products sell as a general rule. So I said, okay, so if I'm going to do a weight loss product, it's got to be something that I can really believe in. So I developed a product. The thought process was we need to get into the psychological edge, not just the physiological edge. So this particular formula is designed to detoxify the colon. It's got a kind of a colon cleansing blend of herbs in there, and also help to with any excess water retention that's happening. And then it works with appetite control and has a little bit of a mild mood boosting impact to it. And my thought process was, while if they take this product consistently, they're not going to lose, 50 pounds because of the downsize formula, but they can lose 3, 4, 5 pounds within the first 2 or 3 weeks in most cases. And that gets on the psychological side of things, because now you're seeing success. And once people start to see success and they're losing 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds, they get more motivated, more excited, more likely to do the other things that they normally would. Because if you go on a diet and you give up your donuts and pizza and you're a week into that diet and you've lost half a pound, there's a pretty decent chance that donuts are coming back on Monday, And so we have to start seeing some results. So that the first thing I usually recommend is something like that that's going to give people a little more of an immediate result, but also because we're detoxifying the system, it's going to make weight loss a little bit easier as well. And then I'll ask them, okay, so what is it that you think you really struggle with? Is it appetite? Is it cravings for sugar? Do you deal with blood sugar, or insulin resistance or diabetes or any of these types of things? Generally speaking, most people that have struggled with weight for an extended period of time, particularly if they're in their 30s, 40s and up, are going to have some insulin resistance, if not significant insulin resistance. And so then a product like the LifeSeasons formula, the glucose stability, makes a lot of sense. Berberine also makes a lot of sense. And interestingly enough, berberine seems to act on the GLP-1 receptor the same way as Ozempic does, just in a much, much more mild way. And we know it is as effective clinically as metformin is for type 2 diabetes, according to the clinical research. So now we're giving people not just something that can potentially assist in weight loss, and I believe that they can assist in weight loss, but we're also giving something to somebody that is actually looking at the root cause of the issue. If insulin resistance is a big factor, which it largely is in obesity, then we need to address that, and both the berberine and the glucose stability address that. So oftentimes I'll recommend that combination for people as well. And then another thing I'll ask people, because I love the emotional side of this, Niki, and I know you do too. I'll ask people why. Why do you want to lose weight? And I was in my kitchen. You mentioned my grandbabies at the beginning of the show. I was in my kitchen Sunday. We had a little board game night with the kids, and my sweet little Ari, my oldest of my grandchildren, she's like 13 weeks old. I was holding her and I was looking in her eyes, and I said, Ari, we're going to have so much fun together. We're going to do so many things together. You and Grandpa, we're going to go camping, and we're going to go swimming, and we're going to go hiking, and we're going to do all these amazing things. And I'm so excited. And I was saying that as much for me as I was for anybody else, because that motivates me to keep on the journey that I'm on, because I can do it, because I can be an awesome grandpa and capable of all the things I want to do as a grandpa if I continue to take care of my health. So if we can get the why, and then also some supplemental things that can really help with the kind of kicking things off in the right direction, then we've got a really good start. And then, of course, diet and exercise are critical as well.
So you're saying if you want to be healthier and improve your longevity, you just need to become a grandparent. Let's wrap it up. And that's it, guys. No, but I totally hear and feel what you're saying with that. The why, getting to the root of like, what's beyond ourself. If we can see another 20, 30, 40 years where we're able to play, and whatever your why is, it might not be grandbabies. It might be something completely different. It might be just, I say skiing, but like going skiing with your partner or traveling the world. How do we reduce these symptoms and these things that are holding us back from living the life, whatever that means to you? Right. And another thing that I think is important when we're trying to meet individuals where they are, I think it's easy to say, okay, stop this, stop this, stop this. But to your point of, okay, if we have to remove the donuts, which is such a fun thing for people, and we don't see the pendulum swing, then that's not the problem. Instead of removing, at least, especially for an individual who does not want to do anything with the gym, wants a quick fix, is not in the resiliency stage of life, is feels beaten up a little bit. Making difficult changes is difficult. I think adding in healthy pieces instead of removing. So maybe, yes, obviously we want to stop smoking. We want to stop, trans fats and all these things. Yes, absolutely. Those are so important. But if you are an individual listening, or maybe you're listening and you're like, my husband is like this, or my father's like this, finding ways to add in healthy pieces. So maybe it's line dancing. Maybe it is skiing. Maybe it's gardening. Maybe it's baking, healthy blueberry muffins in the kitchen with your grandchildren. How do we add in pieces? Because you start increasing your water intake, your movement. Maybe it's intimacy with your husband or wife. You start introducing these pieces. You start feeling a little bit better. You start building this courage that, okay, maybe I can remove this one, because you start noticing these changes, to your point of these psychological changes. You start feeling better. You have a little bit of a pep in your step. You're more willing to remove those pieces. And so I think, there's a few different things that we laid out of, if you're listening, if maybe you were even tempted, or maybe you're currently on Ozempic, there are other things out there that are going to move the needle further for longer without any of the side effects. And I'd argue that they're going to have more positive long-term effects, because they're going to affect the mood in a good fashion. They're going to, you might become a motivation for somebody else in your life. And so how do we eat foods that we can recognize as foods? How can we move our bodies on a regular basis? Maybe that's just standing up at your desk, 30 minutes more a day. Maybe it's gardening. Maybe it's getting out for a walk with your kids. Whatever that might look like, there are solutions. There are things available. And I will make sure, I know this conversation kind of went a variety of ways, and Jared and I love to get into kind of the political aspect of it, but we're kind of harnessing in. So if you're listening and you are interested in that, let us know, because maybe we can explore that a little bit further. But I'll make sure to put in the show notes some of these different citations, articles that we've discussed, and pull that into the show notes. Anything else you'd like to leave with our listeners, Jared?
I think we've said it about as much as I think we can in the amount of time that we have. I think the last thing I'll say, and the reason I told that big, long, drawn out story about me and my wife and, how we really accelerated my health journey, hers as well. But mine was almost on pause because I've known about this stuff for a long time and wasn't doing it. The biggest reason I told that is I think most people struggle with a feeling of empowerment. I feel like people that are feeling, whether it's weight loss or something else, some other health issue that they're dealing with, they oftentimes feel like they're not expert enough to figure it out on their own. So then they need to rely on somebody else, whether that's a podcaster, whether it's their doctor, their naturopathic doctor, whatever it is. And I think that really is a big mistake, to feel like you aren't an expert on your own health. I believe all of us are experts on our own health. And if we'll pay attention to what our body is telling us, every symptom is a message from our body saying something needs to change, and then I won't have this symptom. And that doesn't matter whether it's a headache or a leg cramp or 30 pounds of extra fat around the middle. All of those things are a signal saying, hey, you can fix this. It needs to be fixed. And people like Niki and I are just a resource to become more educated. And that's important because education yields empowerment. So don't feel like you can't do this on your own because you're no expert. Keep in mind that a lot of people consider me an expert, like a lot of people. And it's somewhere between humbling and embarrassing sometimes that people feel that way, because I recognize that, yes, I know a lot of stuff about this, and yet I haven't even followed my own advice to a large degree. So all of us in our own way kind of screw stuff up, don't do things as well as we could otherwise, or should, or know that we could, that kind of thing. But don't feel unempowered. Don't feel like this is an uphill battle that you can't win. It absolutely is a winnable battle. All health challenges are. And I highly, highly suggest that you reframe that thought process. If you feel overwhelmed by it, it's just too much. What Niki said is really valuable. Baby steps matter. Small incremental changes matter. Somebody said the other day, and I wish I could tell you who the quote is from, but imperfect action is still action. So make the move, make the change. You'll learn from whatever mistakes you might make, and you can grow from there.
Absolutely. Well, perfect way to wrap that conversation up. I always love discussing these topics with you. I think, they make you think more and question things more, which I think is such a beautiful gift. All right, Jared. Well, I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks or a week and a half at Expo
week
West.
And a half. Yep.
Yep. That'll be fun. It's a really cool exposition in the natural health food industry. And that's where we first met face to face. So looking forward to that. And we'll chat with you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me on, Niki.
Absolutely. Anytime, Jared.